Can morality exist without God, or does atheism ultimately undermine the very values it depends on? That's the question driving this intense debate between Alex O'Connor and Ahmad. Instead of trading slogans, both sides dig into human rights, evolution, religion, and whether belief itself can be justified simply because it's useful. It's a discussion that quickly moves beyond theology and into the foundations of morality, truth, and human nature. Don't forget to click like, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it.
I think I should begin on the point about Brett Weinstein believing religion to be adaptive and beneficial. I'm perfectly aware, I've seen him argue it myself, but as in the same way that I might appeal to the Benthamite principle that pain and pleasure are our sovereign masters, even though he may have said that rights are nonsense and that natural rights are nonsense on still, I can reference a person's idea without taking what they're saying wholesale, but also the idea that, on this worldview that I'm promoting, if religion is adaptive, which, I don't know if it is, I'm willing to grant it for the sake of discussion, that I'd be committed to a worldview that says that atheists would be continually pretending as though religion exists. I'm wondering if the audience remembers when I issued a throat clearing that said that that's precisely not what I'm doing with human rights. And I even said by name that I'm not saying that human rights do not exist and we just pretend as though they do, but just clarifying the nature of their existence.
So if I take your argument and I input the new variable of God, why would that be incorrect?
Well, I'm not sure it would be, but I'm just arguing that as an atheist, it's coherent to
How
believe in
could
the
it be
concept of human
coherent
rights.
if we grant that religion is adaptive, right?
Yeah.
Belief in God is adaptive. According to your argument, shouldn't we therefore, to maximize pleasure, believe in God?
Oh, well, it depends what you... So this is the thing. When we say that the existence of God, when we're discussing whether or not God exists, we are talking about something more metaphysical. We're talking about the actual... We're not talking about the existence of a concept or a method to maximizing pleasure. When we're arguing about the existence of God, we're arguing about whether or not something is true. When we're arguing about human rights, we're arguing about a method and a concept.
I think you misunderstand what I'm trying to do. What I'm doing is I'm taking your argument.
Yeah.
I'm not challenging it. I'm just changing the variables.
I see.
So maximizing pleasure,
Yeah.
right? Belief in God reduces stress, makes you less depressed, and increases reproductive success and so on, like Brett Weinstein mentions. Then why shouldn't we just pretend as if there is a God just to maximize pleasure?
For a number of reasons. Firstly, I'm not sure I agree with Brett Weinstein on his diagnosis there.
You deny the premise.
Deny the premise.
You deny that religion is adaptive.
But well, I think I'm capable of denying that. I'm just saying that
No,
that's,
I'm just
that's
questioning
one thing that can be taken. I mean, I don't know. I don't know
Sure.
if it's adaptive or not. But also, I think it's a category error that you're making. I don't think that you can swap them in that respect, right? If I talk about human rights as being something which are beneficial to achieving a moral end that does actually exist, I'm not saying that anything that is beneficial to believe exists can be placed in there. I'm saying
why
that
not?
Human rights is of a specific category, that they exist as a concept by definition. That's what they are. That's the nature of a human right. It's a moral mechanism. It's not something that tangibly exists in the way that a God would.
Yeah, I'm not challenging that. I'm saying that's fine.
So you can't swap them for that reason.
No.
Right?
You see, what you're doing is this, right? You're misunderstanding what I'm trying to do. I'm simply saying, if we just take the structure of your argument and we assume, because you may not agree with it. I have some studies here which we can discuss. If we assume that belief in God does have these adaptive benefits and it does lead to maximization of pleasure, then why don't we just simply believe in God?
I've got no problem with saying if people think that it's going to maximize pleasure to act as though God exists in some vague sense and so do so for that reason.
But then there'll be no atheists to believe in human rights.
Only if it is actually true.
Yeah.
That religion is adaptive, and that these people don't, and that these people specifically place a value.
So this is where I'd like to,
and that these people specifically place a value.
Sure.
Not on the knowledge of truth. Because to say to someone when talking about human rights that human rights don't tangibly exist, that's not a problem for them. They're not going to mind that because that's not what they think human rights are anyway. Whereas with religion, I think that if you say, well, look, God is beneficial to you, but doesn't actually exist, I think that's going to be more troublesome to the religious believer. Someone's not going to be able to believe in the same way.
I'm not making an argument for God. I was just showing.
I know you're not, yeah.
I was just showing if this premise is this is what we're going to discuss now. So I could cite studies where there is this benefit. Recently, Pew put out this research that belief in God makes you happier, and so on and so forth. So if that is granted, then that conclusion is valid.
What conclusion?
The conclusion that we'd have to pretend as if God exists.
No, because again, this is what I think that you're missing here, is that these are two different types of thing, right? Religion, the existence of God, are metaphysical truth claims.
Yes.
Human rights are a moral tool.
This is what Alex is saying. His point is that human rights and God aren't the same kind of claim. Human rights are values we create to organize society, while God is a claim about what actually exists. That's why the Christian's analogy doesn't really work. The deeper problem is that once a belief is defended because it's useful, instead of because it's true, there's no obvious place to stop. The same reasoning could be used to defend almost any comforting belief, as long as it helps people cope or improve society. That lowers the importance of evidence without ever admitting it. The debate ends up becoming less about whether God exists, and more about whether truth should ever take a back seat to usefulness.
What I'm doing here is I'm only changing the variables in your argument.
But you're changing them in such a way that can't be done, right? Like you can't just swap in something that isn't of the same category.
Why not?
I mean, I hope that much
Okay, so
would be clear.
Look. Do you believe, for example, you don't believe ontologically morals exist?
I mean, what is that? What do you mean by that? You mean
in your previous video,
like talking about human rights or something, as in principles existing as something tangible in nature somehow? Then no.
No. Okay. So, for the sake of a better society, we can believe in these morals, right?
But that's not that. There's not a case of pretending as though they exist even.
Fine. For you,
yeah.
Right. But what's wrong with us just doing that with God, just to maximize pleasure? Nothing. That's the point.
Yeah,
that's the point.
You
It's
can
nothing.
do that if you like.
Yeah.
But
so my point is that now let's carry on one more step. Then that would mean there'd be no atheists to believe in human rights, because they then end up believing in God.
It's not true.
Why not?
Because again, you're discounting the fact that people take pleasure from knowing what's true, or they can't help but want to know what's true. And if they know that they're living under a misapprehension, then they can't believe something to be the case. Now, why would this not apply with human rights? This is why the category error is being made. Why can't you turn around and say, well, somebody would say the same thing about human rights. They don't actually exist. But what I'm saying is that when people talk about human rights, they're already talking about something that doesn't exist in that way. So for me to point out, these don't exist in nature, they're not tangible, that doesn't make someone go, oh, okay, what now? I guess I'll pretend as though they exist, right? That's just how they're already thought of, and now I'm showing why I think that they're beneficial. Whereas to the religious person, if I say, God doesn't exist in a tangible sense, they're not going to say, well, that's what I believed all along. They're going to say, that's troublesome to me, and I cannot live under a misapprehension. And that's what's going to prevent them. That's what's going to prevent them from becoming as an argument religious.
For God.
No, I'm saying that's what's going to prevent an atheist from just becoming religious for the sake of it, because they wouldn't be able to convince themselves of a misapprehension.
No, but people can do that. People can pretend to believe in something to make themselves happier, and people do it all the time.
You can't choose what you believe.
No, people do this. People come up with these delusions, right, because they want to be happier. So all I was doing was I was trying to show that using your argument, you can come up with this conclusion.
You're showing with my argument that if somebody was somehow capable of being able to convince themselves of a proposition that would make them more happy, then they'd have an interest in doing it. I think that's self-evident, of course.
Yeah.
But what you can't say is that if people accept my argument, atheists would be going religious wholesale, because whereas with human rights, I'm not asking people to delude themselves. I'm just asking them to recognize what human rights actually are as a concept. To do it with religion, you'd have to say that they don't exist, but you do just have to pretend as though they are. In other words, you're asking people to believe two contradictory premises at the same time, which not only wouldn't be done, couldn't be done.
Sure. So of my first two premises, atheism leads to moral nihilism undermines human rights.
Yes.
And therefore atheism undermines human rights. Which one of these do you disagree with?
I disagree with the atheism leading to moral nihilism. You kind of co-opted Plato's Euthyphro dilemma.
I didn't. I used
you didn't use somebody else doing it. To say, so of course the traditional Euthyphro dilemma being
for God.
An argument against morality and God. Are things good because God commands them, or does God command them because they're good? And if I understand the version that you're using, it is this moral statement true because it's selected for, or is it selected for because it's true? Now, of course, myself, I can't believe that it's selected for because it's true, right? Like we'd agree that would be nonsensical in my worldview, but we have to be careful here. I can say something like it is true because it's selected for. Now, what I mean by this is when I talked about the expanding circle of Peter Singer, I explained why it is that we have certain moral propositions, why it is that we have certain moral desires. I then separately justify why we act in accordance with those desires. So I can say that something would be selected for, right, or something can be true because it's selected for, like an experience of pleasure, like the ability to experience pleasure and pain. That's something that's selected for. And it becomes true, because it's been selected for, that suffering is an experience. Suffering is something that exists. From that we can then reason morally.
So what you said there,
Yeah.
I'm just going to use that and change the variables again.
Yeah.
Okay, if we evolved under different environmental conditions and they were selected for, and I didn't have time to go into deeply into why Alex Rosenberg denied the second that it was selected for, therefore it's true. In that case, then killing the elderly would be selected for, and that would be, according to you, a good thing.
It's interesting. It's like you bring up the point put to Richard Dawkins. I think you're quoting my friend Justin Brierley there, who put that question to him, and I put it to him myself, and he has this kind of, well, I guess, I don't know, I think it's, and goes off on some nothing about
he waffles,
about pleasure and pain. But here's the thing, I don't think that the thing that has been selected for, that is an ability to experience pleasure and pain, I don't think that can be different, right?
Okay, so that's where I disagree with you again, and I gave you the example of Stephen Jay Gould, who gives Stephen Jay Gould was the evolutionary biologist who gives the VHS example, that if you replay the tape of life and you start again, we would have a complete different set of organs, complete different set of morals, complete different set of ethics, and so on and so forth. We may not even have the idea of pain and pleasure.
Right, but that can't be true. This is the thing that's crucial, right? So what you can say is that we'd have evolved in such a way that different things would have been pleasurable and different things would have caused suffering. All you're saying there is that...
why is it not conceivable that we don't even have the concept of pleasure?
Well, I'll tell you. The reason being that sentience itself is predicated on a recognition of pleasure and pain. Right? In order to make volitional actions...
No, that's because you're a sentient being on this evolutionary trajectory.
No, not true. It's because sentience is the ability to make decisions, the ability to be conscious, the ability to do something of your own volition, in other words, requires you to make that decision, requires you to have a choice, requires you, in other words, to have a desire to do something. The faculty of desire is incoherent without the concept of the avoidance of suffering and pleasure.
For you, do you know why? Because you've evolved on this trajectory.
No, this is a philosophical point.
That's fine.
It can't be done. I mean, how would it be possible, for example...
See, this is the problem with the universe. It's hard to think out of what we're experiencing. From a naturalistic perspective, if you rewind the tape of life and replay it again, we may not even have the concept of pleasure. We may have a different concept entirely.
This is what's wrong. I have no problem stepping out of our own experience and saying something. We might have evolved, for instance, people might have thought that rape was a good thing, right? This is the point that
I'm not speaking about that. We're speaking about the pain receptors.
Right, sure, but this is the distinction I'm making. Like, somebody might be able to say that, and I don't think, it sounds problematic, of course, to say that people might think rape is okay, but obviously, if all the parties involved in a rape actually want the rape to be occurring, then it's by definition not what we would consider to be immoral rape. It would just become sex, right? So it would be different in that sense, but morally speaking, it wouldn't be problematic. Now, on the reason that pain and pleasure is different is because, like, the reason that those things are conceivable, that the reason you're even able to say that we could have evolved to say that this thing would have been good, or that thing would have been bad for us, or we would have wanted this or wanted that instead, is because we have an experience of pleasure and pain, and because different things could have evolved to maximize the pain and the suffering.
So look, my question to you...
But having pain and suffering is a necessary predicate of having consciousness.
I agree with Alex on this part, because I think his opponent is missing what he's actually claiming. He's not saying humans just happen to evolve pleasure and pain. He's arguing that any conscious being capable of making genuine choices would need some equivalent of them. If every possible outcome felt exactly the same, there'd be no reason to pick one over another. You can call it pleasure and pain, preference and aversion, or something else entirely, but a conscious agent has to value one state over another, or choice loses its meaning. That's why I don't think saying evolution could have produced a completely different kind of mind really addresses his point. The issue isn't what evolution happened to build. The issue is whether consciousness itself requires some internal system for ranking outcomes. If Alex is right, then pleasure and pain belong to the architecture of consciousness itself, giving every decision a direction. That's a far more interesting claim than a debate about biology, because it asks what a mind must be before it can even count as a mind.
For you.
You cannot make... not for me, not for you. It is sentience, as if defined as the ability to be a conscious agent making volitional decisions. You cannot have that without an experience of pleasure and pain. How you experience the pleasure and pain might be different, but the fact that you have a capacity for pleasure and pain, that has to be there.
Why?
Because without it, you can't make, without pleasure and pain, there can be no, the concept of desire is incoherent. And without the concept of desire, you can't make volitional action.
Okay.
And then you're inanimate. And then you're not sentient.
Okay, so what I'm trying to understand from you is, why do you think it's incoherent that we could have evolved in a way that we do not have even the concept of pleasure?
Well,
and at the moment, you haven't given me a reason for that.
I hate to, I feel as though I'm repeating myself, and I hope that perhaps it's because I'm not expressing myself, and it is actually worth going over again. What I'm saying is that if we had evolved, let's say, to not have an experience of pleasure and pain, we would not be sentient.
According to our definition right now.
We would be inanimate.
According to our definition right now.
On
that second evolutionary trajectory, call it Evo 2, they may have a different definition for sentience.
Maybe non-sentient beings can't define sentience, but we have to be careful here. What we're talking about is what that other evolutionary trajectory would have brought about, right? And I'm saying that what we are now calling sentience would not have evolved. Not because they wouldn't call it sentience, but because what we're calling sentience, just the thing that the word sentience is attaching it to, not the terminology, but the thing itself, that would not have evolved. To say that would not have evolved, that is, to say that sentience wouldn't have evolved.
Okay, so let's make it a bit more simpler.
Yeah.
Right now, we're here.
Yes,
we're here with our pleasure, with your philosophical ideas, with these things. Rewind the tape back, we would have something different. Now, you're a determinist, but I want to make the argument general against atheism. Not all atheists are determinists. So
it's conceivable, yeah.
Yeah, it's conceivable. Yeah,
sure.
Perfect. It's conceivable. And so therefore we have two trajectories.
Yes.
Evo 1, Evo 2. Why is yours better than this?
Better?
Yeah. Why is yours?
You mean morally better?
Why is yours true and this false?
I know. So this is the mistake that's being made. If assuming on both trajectories, pain and pleasure as a faculty is evolved. Because
for the sake of this argument, for the sake of this particular argument, let me just clarify.
Right.
Let's just say, for the sake of this argument, to make it easier for you, it's evolved.
Well, it makes it no easier for me.
But no, because you're finding it difficult to...
No, I'm not finding it difficult. I'm saying it is incoherent to say that you can have sentient creatures without an experience of pleasure and pain, or capacity.
Yes, but like I said, they may have a different definition of that.
No, there's no they to be talking about.
Because look, what you're trying to do is you're trying to put yourself in the shoe of a different evolutionary trajectory, which is hard to imagine. So let's just make it easier. Two sets, Evo 1, Evo 2. Your particular maximizing pleasure here is leading us to what Alex Rosenberg calls core morality, and a lot of the things that the UN speaks about, right?
Yeah. And you want to know why that's better than what else?
Than something in which, say, rape is absolutely fine.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right?
Why is this better
as
than
I've already said, on this worldview, if rape is okay, that would be because it does not in fact cause the suffering that it does in this universe. And if it did not cause that suffering, then it would not be what we currently call rape. It would just be sex, in which case it would be okay. So I can't say one's better than the other.
That's the point. That's the point. You can't say one is better than the other. That's what I was trying to get to.
Reason being, because if we'd have evolved differently to experience different things as suffering, my principle, or the kind of tautological principle that I put at the basis of this, is that our suffering is a bad thing. And so what you're asking is that in another evolutionary trajectory, if something else caused us suffering, like if something good caused us suffering and something bad caused us pleasure, I'm saying that's incoherent, because it would just become good and bad. They would just swap over.
Alex's last point is easy to miss. He's saying that if something we currently call good suddenly produced suffering instead of well-being, we'd eventually stop calling it good. In other words, morality takes its shape from the experiences of conscious beings. That changes the whole conversation. The conversation really comes down to whether morality describes objective features of the universe or the experiences of conscious creatures. Evolutionary history is only one piece of that bigger question. If it's the latter, then a different evolutionary path wouldn't expose a flaw in Alex's view. It would simply produce different beings with different experiences, and morality would follow those experiences rather than exist independently of them. That's a much more fundamental disagreement than whether evolution could have turned out differently. I think one assumption slipped by almost unnoticed in this debate. Ahmad kept treating the possibility of a different evolutionary path as though it exposed a weakness in Alex's view. But does it? I'm not convinced it does. Think about it this way. Almost every theory we rely on changes when the thing it's trying to explain changes. Medicine would look completely different if humans had gills instead of lungs. Economics would look different if people never experienced scarcity. Even language would be unrecognizable if we communicated through colors instead of sounds. Nobody sees that as a flaw. It's just the theory adapting to the subject it's describing. So why should morality be any different? If morality is about the well-being of conscious creatures, then changing the nature of those creatures should change morality too. That isn't an admission of defeat. It's exactly what you'd expect. Demanding that morality remain identical no matter what minds exist almost assumes the conclusion before the debate has even started. It assumes morality has to exist independently of conscious beings, which is the very point under dispute. I think that's why the two sides kept talking past each other. Ahmad was asking for a morality that would stay fixed across every conceivable universe. Alex was defending a morality grounded in the kinds of minds that actually exist. Those aren't competing answers to the same question. They're answers to two different questions. And honestly, we do this all the time without noticing. We expect explanations to fit the thing they're explaining. We don't criticize biology because alien life might work differently. And we don't criticize psychology because another species could think in ways we can't imagine. Yet when it comes to morality, people suddenly expect one answer that never changes under any circumstances. To me, that's the real takeaway. Before arguing about whether a moral system succeeds or fails, we first have to agree on what it's trying to explain. Otherwise, we're judging one theory by standards that belong to a completely different one. I'd love to hear what you think. Should morality remain the same no matter what kind of conscious beings exist? Or is it supposed to reflect the experiences of the beings it's describing? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the discussion, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. And be sure to support the original creator by watching the full debate on the original channel.